Hi, I'm Cadieux, an animator and illustrator.
And I'm Ira Marcks. I write and draw comics, and this is a podcast about the mysterious and magical process of bringing cartoon stories to life.
In today's episode, not only are we blasting off to another planet, it's a planet, a different plane entirely, I gather. I'm not 100% sure if that's true. We're going to Eternia. We're talking about He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Original flavor. 80s classic. Welcome to Cartoon Feelings!
I've got feelings, yes I've got feelings, how about you? Oh, we've got feelings, yes we do. We've got some feelings to share.
All right, Caitlin, rolling up to, I think the address was 101 Eternia Drive. That looks like the house. It's a giant skull building.
No, it's not this one. Keep going.
Oh, okay. Let's come around the block. Nope, it's that house for
It's
sure.
the only house, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, we can try this one.
Okay, grab the bottle of wine. It's going to be an interesting night, I think.
Wine sound, wine sound.
Here we go, up to the gate, and I suppose we'll just sort of like rap gently on this giant drawbridge.
Hello? Hello?
Anybody home?
I think a man lives here.
Hopefully he comes to the door.
What's all this racket out here?
Oh, it's Jay Allen.
Oh,
You know what time it is?
yes, it's
Yeah, we
8
know.
p.m.
Yeah,
Eastern
we do
time.
know.
Well,
Oh, we
in my
thought-
neighborhood, we don't come a-knocking on the Castle Grayskull drawbridge.
Not on Wednesdays at 8 p.m.?
I feel like we had this scheduled beforehand, so we're kind of we're on the right side.
Yeah,
of
didn't we call ahead?
history.
Wait a minute,
here.
checks my... Oh, gosh, I am so sorry. You're
Yeah, no,
you're
that's
actually
fine, Jay.
right on time.
Oh,
I'm
boy.
so sorry.
It's important to be disgruntled just as a first stage of defense.
Yeah, we get a lot of solicitors at Castle Grayskull, so I just kind of
shit.
have
I
this
think-
wall up at first, so I do apologize.
I think we're technically solicitors.
Yeah, but we're on the friendlier side of it.
Yeah, we just
Solicitors that I know and trust.
Oh, you solicited us.
I mean, it was like kind of a two-way street, if I'm honest.
Mutual
Yeah.
solicitation.
Yeah, well, Jay Allen here to talk to us today about the original run of Masters of the Universe. And now, we have to put this up front because people either know or they don't know, or they need to know now because they're going to find out later.
A lot of options.
Jay Allen, a.k.a. SLACKCiRCUS. True?
True. So far, true.
Okay. Now, you've got a little bit, just like a little taste of your history with this franchise. I don't know if you want to sing a song or like
Oh,
if you have
gosh.
a little bit or anything that you do.
Are you moved by the spirit to sing
Or we
this
could
song
drop,
right
should we just
now?
drop it right in here? Like we'll drop a little audio clip.
You could
People will
we
drop
have
the
legal
audio
permission?
clip in there. I am not confident that I can do falsetto right now.
Okay,
but
we'll
I
just
can
listen
try.
to it.
Yeah.
I'm confident.
You want to try it? I'm going to try it, and we'll see how it goes. And we can just put it over like the instrumental track or something if it sucks.
Okay.
Oh my god, we're gonna have a beautiful. What's that tiny desk? Anyway,
Yeah, it's
Just
tiny.
acoustic.
Tiny desk. Let me get my harmonium out. I'll be right back.
He's actually doing it.
All right, I'm gonna try it. I kind of did it.
That sounded
was pretty
really
great.
good. Yeah,
You even did the head tilt.
I mean, it's the only way that I
Wait.
can get to that range.
yeah. It's actually that's 100% just a mechanical motion. It's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah,
There's no other
that's
reason
why,
to do
That's
it.
why Prince Adam does it.
So, you either get it or you don't. We'll come back around to, what that all means later in the show. But I think we got to start where all things start with
The beginning.
stuff like this, 80s cartoons. Where were you? Where were you when you first saw Masters of the Universe?
Well, I would have been in second grade in Arlington, Texas. And I would have been sort of ping-ponging back and forth between G.I. Joe and He-Man. Those were at least the most popular shows of the day, as I recall it. So that's the picture that I still have. And I remember very much playing with the action figures. My friend Chris down the street had the Castle Grayskull and the whole 9 yards. So Masters of the Universe was a big player in my childhood.
Yeah, that makes sense. Should we go chronologically? Should I go next?
Yeah, where were you, Ira?
Okay. Well, I'm slightly younger, I think.
Yeah,
I'm 40. I'm 41.
Okay, I'm 47. So,
oh, okay,
yeah, so
perfect.
82, 83. Yeah, I was like, that was second, third grade years.
So my mom loves to say that I was kind of like born in the movie theater watching Empire Strikes Back. She's like,
Literally,
"You were
that is what
born,
happened.
You were watching that movie." That's what I was doing in 1981, apparently. But, you know, a year or two later, He-Man came along, and it was a real, looking back now, there's like the side of me that is Empire Strikes Back, and that's the side I want to be like known and present. Because that's the fantasy with the story that came first. But He-Man, I do have to admit, it is extremely important to my childhood. A lot of that art just like still resonates with me to this day. But, and we'll get into this a little more, I always struggle with saying He-Man is part of my identity because it was so much of a kind of art and like product first and story second. And this will be like part of our conversation for tonight. So that's where it sits in my life. A little yin yang of
Well, for me, it all began when I saw Jay's video.
2005.
And this is literally true because I wasn't born yet in the 80s. I came about in the late 1990. So didn't have access to this as far as I'm aware. I knew about it. I had awareness of this. And I was telling Ira before we got on that like Thundercats was a show I was really into as a kid. And like, it's so obvious that the parallels, honestly,
like a version
shockingly
2.0.
so. Yeah, like it's like, I can't believe I didn't.
There were no new ideas.
It was like literally there's like a mummy bad guy with a mummy face and his name is Mum-Ra. Like, wow, that must be completely original. TM, do not steal. So I feel like spiritually I was on the right track, but just that was what was airing at the time.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, so you're probably talking about Fabulous Secret Powers, which my friend Ryan and I made in 2005, and put it up on YouTube. This was kind of pre-YouTube, so 2005 YouTube was just kind of getting off the ground, and we had been, I guess it was the early days of sharing. When somebody asked me the other day, what's your earliest memory of internet humor or seeing a meme or something like that? And one of the first was Trey Parker and Matt Stone's early, like very, very, very first South Park short. That was just, it was supposed to be a Christmas card or something for their friends. And they just made it just kind of on a lark. And people started emailing it around like it was southpark.avi or something. I don't even think it was called South Park then. And so we started forwarding that around. And then, of course, you know, when I was in college, that was the days of Space Ghost Coast to Coast and C-Lab 2021 and those kinds of shows where they did remixed Hanna-Barbera animation, enter the internet, and all of these videos being shared in various ways. And we found this, well, we didn't find it. Everybody was exposed to the G.I. Joe PSA videos. This would have been Eric Fensler's. Do you remember when that was? Do you remember those, Ira?
I remember those.
I probably saw them in syndication. That's the thing. A lot of the stuff, could have been like 8 years later. I was watching it from original broadcast.
So like the G.I. Joe episodes that were on TV. And then years later, there was a series of videos that this guy, Eric Fensler made where he remixed old G.I. Joe animation.
Oh, the remix.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah. I remember
Yeah,
that. In
those were
college.
like,
Totally.
that rocked my world. I had never seen anything that funny in my life, you know.
It's true. It was another type of humor. I agree. I didn't laugh like that before that stuff existed.
That's exactly. It's just like, because it's not
New
possible.
art.
You know, when you have a writer's room and all these people like agreeing on a story, like you don't get weird things like that.
Right.
Just the right amount of weird and funny. And anyway, so that was like, Eric Fensler really was the genesis of all of the Fabulous Secret Powers story.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I didn't even realize it was 2005, but I feel like that was my... Like, I'm still in that period where if you don't know what that is and you haven't seen it, I'm like, who are you? Like, what? Like, it's just so... Every now and then I'll meet a stray person who I guess just wasn't on the internet until very recently and, like, hasn't encountered this film. And it's very confusing to me. So I think that was probably my biggest actual exposure to He-Man culture, as I will call it, for the rest of the episode.
Right. Yeah. The internet just sort of flattens the timeline with so much of this stuff. Because I've talked to teens that are like, yeah, Gumby, that's from the 80s also. Like, in like the popular culture, the 80s is just where everything from the past sits and waits to be like remixed.
Yep. That is very accurate. I was having that conversation yesterday with my I don't remember what it was. My daughter was pointing out some piece of animation somewhere that we were looking at. It's like, oh yeah, that's from the 80s, right? I'm like, that was 1997.
Oh no!
Whatever.
It is.
Yeah.
It's the timeline is collapsing.
So we do have to flash back a little bit because it'll be one thing to kind of talk about the characters in the show and the aesthetic and what we like and what we don't like, but the framing of what Masters of the Universe is and where it comes from, I think is like really interesting. And this isn't something we've really had to talk about on the show yet. So, okay. The reason I wanted to bring up Star Wars right off the bat, because clearly Masters of the Universe, a product by Mattel, a toy company, they wanted Star Wars so bad. And like, who didn't? Because they were selling 1 million toys. But the thing with Star Wars is that it is rooted in like a creative space with like a guy named George Lucas. It's kind of seeded from somewhere. But Masters of the Universe is not at all, right? It's kind of a group of people. And, we've got a bunch of their names down here. And it's not to say they're not creative, but it doesn't spring from the imagination in the way a lot of the things that culturally resonate and, the narrative arts. Masters of the Universe is something that's so primed to be remixed right off the bat because that's all it ever was. It was like shuffling around of fantasy aesthetic right from the get-go.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It was just, it was kind of a grab bag of a bunch of popular things. It was sort of, marketing folks crunching the numbers and looking at demographic data and Venn diagrams and stuff. And it's like, all right, so this like barbarian aesthetic plus sci-fi plus this other thing that boys love is going to kill. So that's the starting point. Now let's make a bunch of characters around that. No story connecting them, nothing. Just like, what do they sound like? What do they like? What do they do? It's very, the brain science behind all of that's really, really interesting to me.
Right. We've got, we got a couple of the names here. So we've got like Mark Ellis, who's the Mattel marketing dude at this time. And I guess just if you're a dude in the late 70s, you're into Franz Frazetta. Do you know who that is? He's like the Conan barbarian artist. You've definitely seen his
like
Purple Sky,
more of like a
glowy
Xena household for me, but I was always like adjacent to the Conan world. Yeah. So picked it up.
It's just sort of a timeless like archetype, right? Like it's just like the perfect choice for
so much so that it's like obviously so obvious the influence that it is here. And I was watching some of this backstory, like documentaries and making ofs and stuff, where they're basically like, make it Francetta, but not too close.
Just get right up there.
Yeah, do it Conan, but not all the way.
Well, they tried to get
a lot of the influence.
They tried to get Conan, right? It's like, but then they saw what the movie was going to be. They're like, oh, well, that's like a little dark. We can't be the Arnold Schwarzenegger for kids.
Well, not to skip around too much, just chaotically in this conversation as we usually want to do. But I do want to save some time at some point in this conversation to talk about the weird, like, prohibition against violence of He-Man.
Oh, yeah.
And that whole thing, because I find it just fascinating generally, and super bizarre. And like, I think a running theme that will emerge in this conversation is how much these like intense restrictions can actually fuel creativity.
Sure.
Because like, it doesn't, like, I just sit down and I'm hearing this story about how it's made, and it's like, we need toys, like, we're a toy company, make toy, like, do stuff, what is good, what do people like, and then they just like back into He-Man eventually.
Yeah.
But they end up doing some really cool stuff. And one of my favorite examples that I picked up, it was in this documentary that you sent us, Jay. I think it's Power of Grayskull.
Yes, that's a
is
good
the name
one.
of it.
Yep.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I loved the beginning parts. They're talking about like the inception of making these toys and the actual process that goes into that. And they were like, "Oh shit! Like we need a vehicle or something. Oh, but we have no money. Take this tiger from this completely unrelated, already existing set." And they can't even change the size of him.
No.
Like the reason that Battle Cat becomes like He-Man's horse is because he was just really big in comparison to the model.
I love
they
that,
had.
but it's like that's what a lot of art is, right? It's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, necessity's the
What
mother of
assets do you
invention. It's like, I got an idea. What if he rode the tiger?
Yeah, it was like we put a saddle on, and I just like make him green, fantasy
Yeah,
fantasy
mix it up.
tiger, boom, done.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
just like,
What was the-
And honestly, I love that.
It was the other show. It was like a jungle show that they took the tiger from. What was that? Do you remember?
Oh, it was like something Jim. It was like Jungle Jim or
yeah,
something. Though it was like, yeah,
That
he was just like wrangling this tiger.
exactly. So they just they kind of got a bunch of scraps of different toys and different ideas and different designs and Frankenstein these characters together in large part from what at least what I learned in that documentary.
And I think the thing that really keeps it all together with those original models is, yeah, if you take the heads off, a lot of the bodies are like three versions, especially in the first and second phase. But like the heads are very distinct and they're like extremely expressive, which I don't think was really something that was going on. Because when you look at the Star Wars toys, they're quite bland. Like they're really just rigidly standing there.
Yeah.
Whereas like these characters are so much more cartoonish in their like they're mid-pose almost, like they're about to do something in a way I think a lot of toys weren't. And I think that primes it to be it's just like a great starting spot for a kid's imagination that the Star Wars stuff wasn't doing. Or even, G.I. Joe was, but even that, they're a little blank face. But He-Man is so like emotive.
And that's one thing that they really got right was the way that they articulated the characters, and that was a true selling point. It wasn't just like, oh, like we just had these parts laying around. That is something that they thought about and made it actually cool. Like you could put these guys in these really, dynamic poses and it looked like they were about to do something cool, right? The Star Wars characters, like the Kenner characters, they all had straight arms and legs. Like it's like, all right, I'm going to go sit in my
They're
X-Wing now.
Monros. Yeah, just jam in there, straight leg.
Oh, yeah, like I have never seen muscles like I do on He-Man. I know we all know that, but just like the rippling plastic
Just
on this man.
The he-est man of all time.
Yeah, like big
Actually,
he
since
energy.
we're on the topic, I'm going to show you the, and you won't be able to see this, folks at home.
We can describe
But
it to the audience.
This was the
Imagine it,
Super
viewer.
7 figure
Listener.
of Laughing Prince Adam. So Super 7 made a
Hell yeah.
they did a whole run of special edition characters and regular characters. They did some of the original characters and just kind of re-released them. But this one, they released at Comic-Con in 2017 or 2018, and it has like the rainbow on
It's
it
perfect.
glitter
It's so
and all
great.
of that. And it's actually, I think this one is more articulated than let's see. Yeah, I think his arms bend a little different, like in two
Okay,
places,
yeah.
and his wrists rotate. So they added more articulation, but the body model is essentially the same.
Yeah, it must
Yeah.
feel the same
Yep.
to
It
hold
does.
it
It just
as
moves more.
as the childhood toy. Yeah. Like, okay, something we got to give some credit towards, because I think a big part of the promise of the world of He-Man that comes together with, the cartoon, the toy line, and you've got the mini comics, which is that first placement of the narrative arc, because someone on the team must have known that it's like, it can't just be a great toy is just not good enough anymore, because we've seen great toys, but to put a
That's
story,
old hat now.
yeah. But those little comics are great. And also the packaging art, like who's the guy? Okay, so we've got Mark Taylor, who's one of the character designers. You have Ted Mayers, who's the vehicle guy, and Rudy Obrero is painting like the packaging art. And I think between him and Mark Taylor, you get like the box for Castle Grayskull is like just such a masterpiece of fantasy art. It's so dark and moody in a way that I think things like Adventure Time and like cartoons from the last decade or so try to capture a bit in their work again. But you really didn't see kid stuff being like that dark and stormy, and it was grimy
and
too.
that's
right. Like the rock was so textured.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what freaked out all the parents at that time. Because it looked like, just at a glance, it kind of looks like dark fantasy, and the way that they're the interpretation of the universe. Like, I think it was cool how these illustrators. Yeah, that's one benefit, I guess, of having practically a blank slate. It's like, all right, we have these characters, but we have no story, no universe. Go make something, and they're like, okay,
right,
I'm gonna make the coolest thing I can think of.
And they are. Like, it's cool. I don't know. To me, it's cool in the Rats of Nim kind of way. Like, it's so dark.
Oh, yeah.
It's got a slight bit of tech, but it's mostly fantasy magic
and it's
shit.
Colorful.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have that much to say from a, like, making of standpoint, but I really like the use of color in He-Man stuff, in the cartoon especially. And even in these, like, the paintings that he was doing, that Rudy Obrero was doing, they're very striking, and they often have some weird, like, there's a lot of green in them too, obviously, like for the Battle Cat stuff, but just like weird colors. I'm like, that's really nice.
The rules of like secondary and primary colors in the storytelling of He-Man, and like on to Ninja Turtles and all those 80s cartoons. I feel like that's also fundamental in, like, at least how me as a cartoonist like thinks about how I pick colors for character designs. It's all really rooted in here because, you know, without those comics or other things, the storytelling kind of just has to exist in the model itself, right? It's like, well, who's the good guys and bad guys? What if I threw out the package? I don't know. But you can tell because purple is the bad guy color.
It was very obvious. Those hero colors. And, you know, when you would look at the box art, I just remember getting a new figure and looking at the box, and there's just like a whole world sort of opens up. It like caused you to wonder like what else was going on. Like, it felt like a world that you wanted to be a part of more than the figures in a lot of ways. Like, you know, the figures were kind of a placeholder, but to me, the most appealing thing about Masters of the Universe was always the universe itself, like the story universe. It's actually legit really cool.
Yeah. So a couple guys, before we get into the cartoon itself, we just got to give a little credit to Donald Glute and Alfred Alcala, giving so much credit. I'm not sure if I'm saying his name right or not. But these are the mini comic guys. And I think they're well-versed in comics.
I'm
like,
going to say this
obviously.
quickly for the audience, because if you're like me, a baby child born past the 80s, they put little tiny mini comic books inside the toy packages to tell you the story of He-Man.
Yeah, they're like little, they're like 2.5 to 3 inches tall. I actually, not to be like, well, actually about it, but they're not very comic-y, and they don't really use frames and like sequential art. It's like an image with a block of text underneath.
Yeah, they struck me as more like children's books, actually, in that way.
Yeah, but comics sounds cooler. And there were comics like DC, you know, put like there's an iconic like He-Man versus Superman issue around somewhere, which is like total nonsense.
Very strange.
But I'm sure worth, you know, $530 or something.
Have you been looking?
No, I don't know. It
cruising
just
around
feels about right. That type of thing. Let it be known I do not collect comics.
He does. No, I'm just joking. I don't know.
Okay, so we kind of plant the seeds for what the world can be, how we can mix and match these characters. We got the models, we got the faces, we've got the color schemes. And then, you know, Mattel's like, well, we need that cherry on top, that cartoon. So they go to Hanna-Barbera first, not into it. And I actually was looking into this a little bit. It was in one of the videos. I can't remember which one. But they started off with sort of like a rundown of Mattel's history of like Saturday morning cartoon, and there's some pretty silly shit in there. There's like from the late 60s, there's a Hot Wheels cartoon, which I can't imagine what the hell that was about.
What did they do?
I imagine it's
Fast
ripping off
cars?
Speed Racer or something.
Was there
but,
anybody driving them?
I don't know. I just saw a couple clips, and it's like, yeah. Well, that's the thing. I think it's Speed Racer asking that there's like a track and a competition, probably. I don't think they're like anthropomorphic cars, which wouldn't happen later.
What a shame.
Yeah.
One of my favorite genres.
So there's already kind of like, I guess, a little preset of we can kind of sell toys by marketing them with cartoons, but it's not really until like Ronald Reagan in the 80s kind of says that, no, fuck it. You can sell whatever you want to kids. The rules are off.
No
right?
holds barred.
So by the time... Yeah, and this is the world we live in now. So
Thanks, Reagan.
whatever, we're doing the best we can. But okay, so Mattel attaches itself to Filmation.
True.
Okay.
I don't know if you were asking, but confirmed.
No, they have a great title card. I'll say that.
They have a fantastic title card.
And a very cool sound that goes with the title card.
That is a whole aesthetic
Yeah.
and vibe unto itself.
Yeah.
Can I just say, I really appreciate in the 80s, they were like, make it rainbow, but the green is like a nice teal.
Yeah.
Yep.
Perfect.
Beautiful. Crisp.
Yeah. I borrowed that sound for my SLACKCiRCUS little mnemonic.
Yeah.
And it's great. Like, I don't want to change it, really. Like, I'm not allowed to use it, technically, but...
Filmation, hang up. Don't
yeah,
listen
exactly.
to this.
Exactly. Please.
I don't know if
Please
they
don't
still
come after me.
exist.
But it sounds like a pile of bones or like a marimba or something like that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with the gleam at the end, because it's like, this is the 80s, and everything's a little shiny.
Yeah. And while everybody was watching stuff on TV all the time, every day at this point, there's something about this period, because He-Man was on like 5 days a week, at least. There was little else. Like hearing those little sounds and seeing those little title cards like that, this feels like the beginning of all that setting itself into like the collective consciousness. And it's just like, if you played that sound right now, I would know it. You would probably know it too, even though you weren't there.
Yeah, I didn't really watch it. Yeah.
It's just really fascinating how we're like trapped with this era. I don't think it'll ever go away. Really,
Definitely.
I mean, you can constantly.
I can confidently say it's never going to go away. And it's like we need source material constantly. Everyone that's creating stuff, like, so much content to create. I know the lament. Where are we going to get all this stuff? Well, the 80s is a treasure trove.
Right. So, okay. So we've got Louis Scheimer, head of animation, big Conan guy, loved Frank, of course, and all that stuff. So he was on board. He gets his team together, and they're like, look, this is a great deal for us, because not sure what they were doing before. Who cares? But, they're contracted for 65 episodes off the bat, 13-week schedule. All his animation team can stay employed for a period of time. So they pick up the project. And then they're just pumping out He-Man episodes. And they have a pretty, like, I would say they're doing a great job with the assignment they were given, right? Like, a lot of these stories they're solid little, like, 30-minute little riffs on, like, a fantasy fantasy trope.
And they took just all of these different facets within that universe and kind of explored them enough to conclusion. Different character types, sort of like different cultural experiences, and the way that they told stories, I thought was, yes, it was to sell toys, but a lot of it was really magnetic in that you would have these episodes where you'd see this one character that you see one time and then you never see again. And, but they put a lot of, as much effort as the budget would allow into telling that story, which I thought was really cool. It wasn't just like the same 5 characters every time.
Yeah, totally. And Caitlin, like, we talk about this all the time. Like, everything is a job at some point, like, no matter how cool it looks when it's done. And
so true,
yes,
Ira.
I also agree.
Work.
And in any project, you have these little, like, moments. Even the most, you can be so cynical about He-Man if you want. But these are real people, like, real creative people doing interesting things within the space. So it's like, even if you're like, all right, I'll listen to you guys talk about He-Man for a while, I recommend going back and watching some of these episodes, because, like, there's some strong storytelling.
Yeah, I want to say, and I'll probably get this a little mixed up, because a lot of what I learned about the production process of this show and the toys happened in, like, the last 2 weeks. So it's all very fresh to me. So I'm gonna lose track of like the writers that they had on this versus the whatever and the whatever. But for something that came out of like a raw capitalistic inquiry, I feel like everything they made is actually really good for what it was. And I think we all kind of know that as a baseline. But like, even hearing these old guys now on this documentary talking about like, oh, back then we were making this like, da da da, and I said to him and he said to me, and like, da, we grabbed the tiger from the other set, whatever. Like, it's really funny how much you can feel that they were like really enjoying it and like really trying with what they had, which was basically nothing. So because like I think it's easy, and I'm sure that at least behind the scenes to some degree there was this going on, but I think it's easy to assume in that process, like, oh, it's like the suits are working on this and there's no, creativity. It's people like focus grouping to death. But really, and I think this is very beautiful, I think this became a spectacular opportunity for a bunch of nerds to get to do their nerd shit that they'd love to do, that they'd like had inside them, and then they were like, oh, I get to like make the story Bible for this and just kind of like unleash. Like, I think all of us dream. This is obviously universally relatable. All of us dream to find ourselves in such a situation.
I'd love to make a
gainfully employed
someday.
And just be like, make it neat. Like, what's a neat thing? I don't know.
I was watching the. Have y'all seen the Light and Magic documentary? Have you watched any of that? It's about industrial light and magic. It's on Disney Plus.
No, I haven't
Check it out.
seen it.
It's very cool. But it talks about the early days of industrial light and magic, and when they had this enormous special effects request via George Lucas. Like, all right, I'm going to make this space epic. So how are we going to do it? And it was the same kind of deal with the He-Man animators, where it was sort of like this ragtag gang. They just like, hey, I know a guy that does this. Like, I know a guy that makes models. I know a guy that's a map painter. I know, like just all these people assembling this super team to just make weird stuff. Hey, what are we supposed to be doing? You can kind of do what you want. Like, we just have these action figures. Like, we're just going to make it up. Cool. That sounds like pretty ideal to me. So I think they were having a good time.
So this is a studio that originally was working on, I think it's the early 50s, mid 50s, Superman cartoon. That stuff looks really good. So it's like, there's like but there's a shift here, and Jay, maybe a lot about this, maybe because you've kind of dissected these character models and stuff, like you've taken them apart and put them back together. So I don't know, like, what do you know about the production of this? Because it doesn't look like anything I've really like thought a lot about. Like, it doesn't look like Disney. It doesn't look like Max Fleischer. It doesn't look like Looney Tunes. Like, is it rotoscoped or what? Like, how are these pieces being animated?
A lot of it is rotoscoped, and you can see, there's certain sequences that they repeat over and over again. There's this one photo that I remember in the Power of Grayskull documentary, where it has all of the actors that they based the rotoscope work on, and they're kind of wearing the costumes, and it's great, and like same build as He-Man, and so like, there's this one sequence you'll see over and over again. I'm just going to get up to illustrate, but like, he runs to the middle of frame, he looks back and forth, and then he runs off frame. That was rotoscope. And like, there was this one where he like throws his sword back and forth, rotoscope. I think most of the running, like they did it a lot. And, they had, the laugh, like the laugh that's in Fabulous Secret Powers is a very oft used sequence in the show by multiple characters.
God, I love that.
They're having a great time in Eternia.
Yeah.
I do want to say, again, I apologize that I'm just going to be like changing the subject, but related to the laugh thing, this made me think of a line, and I wish I could remember who said it in the documentary, but somebody had said they'd sort of protested against the in later years of production of the toy line that it sort of got like barbified, like barbification. I don't think he used that term, but they were just like churning out new characters that really were just like these repaints of the old models, and he just felt that it got silly, and he was like, He-Man was never supposed to be silly. And I was like, are you sure? Because it strikes me as very silly. And I did watch a bunch of episodes to prep for this, but it strikes me as silly in a very intentional way. Like, it doesn't, Like it feels, even just the voices that they're doing, like the voice of Skeletor is not how you would imagine if you just saw an image of Skeletor and he's like, I'm the bad guy in this cartoon picture. Like he's just so funny.
Yeah, it's like a Batman villain from the 60s.
Yeah,
almost, right?
and you kind of get the impression that the people like doing the voices are having fun. Like everything about it says like we're having fun and we're not.
Yeah.
This isn't like an epic sprawling tale. So I just thought that was interesting because the laugh repeated over. I mean, I think there's such a charm in reusing animation like that.
Yeah, completely. And it's like they, you know, I think over time of these actors, I mean, it was a very small handful of actors that did everything. And the voice of He-Man was like 12 different characters. Any B character, I guarantee it's one of the other main characters. But they brought, I remember there was one part, maybe this is what you're talking about in the documentary where Alan Oppenheimer is talking about how he chose to read Skeletor in this really, you know, and he had this like, they discovered that people responded really well to funny Skeletor, you know, where he would have these, you know, little jokes and he was just sort of like this wacky gangster from the 20s. I mean, he always has this like, it's like, you'll never take me alive, coppers.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. But he's talking to henchmen, and he was always like, "You stupid!" Like I don't think he ever said that, but yeah, he's just like, "What are you, dumb?" Like he's just
constantly
very insulting, and
his
very
cohorts,
funny
for sure.
Right. Yeah. Because it's like and it doesn't go any further than that, right? There's no fallout of his behavior in any way. There's no like thematic like lines that go through a story arc. It's all just like we're here next week. We're recycling the same drama.
And it's like, what is Skeletor gonna get up to this time? It's probably not gonna be good, but
hijinks.
Usually, and some of the situations are downright wacky. You know, where there's this one episode called Evil Seed. It was. Did you watch?
Oh,
Evil
I
Seed?
love Evil
So
Seed.
it's like the one where Caitlin, in this episode, there's this plant creature named Evil Seed. He looks like an onion head. Like his head literally looks like an onion, and his mouth looks like a fish. And
that makes
exactly. Sense. And he casts this spell. Like he basically makes these vines grow all over Eternia, and everyone's like, all of the bad guys, they're all like trapped in vines, and they can't run their vehicles because the vines are caught in the wheels, and Evil Seed's about to take over the entire planet, and Skeletor and He-Man are like, well, I guess this one time we're gonna have to work together to defeat Evil Seed.
Can you believe it?
Yeah.
Okay, I am actually gonna go home and watch that episode.
I feel like that's probably was a mind-blowing thing for a kid because I think that's like late in season 2 even. It's like there had been 100 episodes of like just black and white antagonism between He-Man and Skeletor.
Yep.
Suddenly, they're hanging out
Common ground. Thanks, Evil Seed.
to fight nature. And
Thanks,
destroy
bro.
it.
Yeah, it is important to stamp
Right,
out nature.
exactly. That's what I took away. That was in the PSA actually in that episode.
Nature
What we learned
sucks.
today is that there should be no regulations of any kind.
Thanks, President Reagan. Can we really quickly to talk about the PSAs, which I didn't know existed until very recently because I'd never properly seen an episode. And also, I kind of love them. There was some open disdain from some of the writers on the show who were like, we just did this as a concession to the consultants who wanted everything to be like fluffy and nonviolent, like happy for the kids. And I was like, I think your show is better for these because it'll be like an episode about, I don't know, He-Man like finding his baby tiger and raising him from a cub or whatever, and then like becoming friends and unlocking their true potential. And then at the end, they'll be like, don't drink out of anything that has a skull icon on it because it's poison and it'll kill you. That's the PSA.
Exactly.
Bye.
And several of them were a pretty big stretch. I'm like, I don't know if that's exactly the takeaway from this episode, but I appreciate you trying.
They're not wrong. Like, I don't know. In a way, maybe we should bring that back. I can't think of the equivalent in children's media. I'm not watching a lot of children's media, I guess.
Well, and now it's like everything in children's media from what I've seen. It's like, well, the show itself, it has to have goodwill and lessons and everything sort of woven into how it's created.
Right.
And it's like in the He-Man days and G.I. Joe days, I mean, they were basically exploiting a loophole. It's like, well, you can pretty much do whatever you want as long as there's a lesson at the end, as long as you tell the kids, don't go near the downed power lines. But the episode can have anything that you want. Not anything, but yeah, there are a lot of political forces at play during this time, for sure.
It's interesting because from like how much more work would it have been to interweave, some of those thematic elements, add a bit of morality to these stories? Like, so for the Evil Seed one, it's like you have kind of an Ents type character from Lord of the Rings. Like, you could reflect on like humans' relationship with nature very easily with like a couple lines of dialogue. And it's not there. In fact, I would almost say I'm probably bringing this to the table a little bit. But with this episode, I was really waiting for that, just because when you see enough fantasy stuff, you kind of expect certain things. When it's like, oh, like an ancient plant character emerges. Clearly, it's going to be about this. But it's Evil Seed's death scene is pretty well animated when he breaks apart. Of course, He-Man makes it snow. He punches an ice ball or something.
If you're He-Man, that's how you change the weather.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very convoluted how they get him to punch it. It takes like 10 minutes of planning. But of course it tricks Evil
That's
Seed.
the challenge.
And so now he thinks it's snowing. So he thinks his season of dominance is over. He's missed his window. And he crumbles into autumn.
I liked
the season.
Evil Seed.
He falls,
And it's
metaphorically.
like, technically it's kind of a little, almost beautiful. Maybe not, but why not throw a couple lines in there that give this story a little
for
more?
your viewing pleasure, if you're able, I put a link in the chat to a Vine that I made about the Evil Seed episode because I liked it so much. And this is like the moment of his death.
Okay, I'm putting the Evil Seed episode on my iPad right now to
like,
enjoy
no,
while
it's
we
no.
are-
Oh, he hates it. It's well done animation though, right? It's like it gets a little more, into it, and I think it stands out maybe mostly because like you were saying, a lot of the rest of the animation is kind of recycled stuff.
That looks really brutal, honestly, too. Like, that actually looks pretty cutting when he just collapses in on himself like that. Some days I am Evil Seed.
Because I'm sure there's very little death in this show overall, and all the characters are standing around watching his demise.
Yeah, and they're just like, they're looking on, like, happy, like, what? What? He just melted, like the guy in Indiana Jones. It's no big deal.
Right.
Don't let the door hit you on the way out, Evil Seed.
I just wonder what my young mind was thinking with this stuff. I was like, is this how you're supposed to react when nature dissolves in front of you? Like, are you just supposed to stare, unblinking?
Well, what can we do, Ira?
To the void.
Ira, you were talking before about how like the animators explored a lot of they covered a lot of ground, and also they had a lot of time to fill. I really feel like the random enemies is where this show really shines. Slash is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. Yeah, like they just ran out of ideas. There's this one episode where the enemy, it's like he's just like fire. He's like fire with he looks like Pizza the Hut from Spaceballs. He's just like this big flame, and it's like and it's supposed to be the most evil force in the world. I'm like, the most evil force in the universe. Right. He looks ridiculous.
They do nail it a couple times though early on, right? There's something that's just really perfect about blending a little bit of technology with the fantasy, because you get all the cool vehicles. You get like a man at arms, right? He's like almost RoboCop kind of in a way.
Yep.
And a character this doesn't need to turn into like, let's list our favorite characters, but one of my favorite characters was Mordock, who was kind of like a red demonic type character that came a little later, and his body parts could like unplug and replug in all these different forms. And it's like characters like that, they only kind of emerge because it's trying to play to a gimmick of a toy, which is just a really interesting space. It's like an artistic realm that only gets played with when you have like Mattel and Filmation teaming up to create synergy.
I mean, they just had to figure it out. You know, it's like I was looking and studying the design of Man-E faces recently for a video that I'm working on, and
could you describe that character to the audience?
Man-E faces. I'll start with the action figure because that's where the animators had to just figure this out. Like, how are we going to make a story about this guy? And so he basically has the same build as He-Man, same build as all of the Masters of the Universe characters.
Yeah, fun fact, they all have the same muscular structure.
Exactly the same molds. Like literally the same molds. And the difference with Man-E faces, though, is he kind of has a... are you familiar with that guitarist Buckethead, where he wears the Kentucky Fried Chicken helmet? So it's like he basically has like a upside down bucket on his head, and the action figure had this little rotating dial at the top, and so you could rotate the dial, and his face would switch from regular human face to robot face to green scary monster face. So he had.
That is kind of genius, honestly. Shout out to whoever came up with that.
It was pretty cool, and in the episode, the way that they the story that they wrote around Man-E faces was that he's actually kind of a thespian at heart. He enjoys the stage. He enjoys the theater. And so
of course
but he's kind of an out of control being. He has these other spirits that sort of inhabit him, the robot and the monster, and so it's
big theater kid
exactly.
energy.
I mean, can any of us not relate to that?
Yeah.
Inside him, there are two wolves.
Exactly. So Skeletor, of course, finds a way to exploit Man-E faces and take control of the robot side of him and the monster side of him, and it pushes out the good side of him. And so in the end, He-Man saves him, and he's able to control his emotions. Finally, got that under wraps now, and then he gets to pursue his theater career, and he gives a big performance to the entire kingdom at the end. He wears a cape and everything.
Wait, is that last part?
That's true. Like,
true.
I've got the episode right here.
Okay. Thought you were
no.
riffing.
Like, it's literally like I am using that clip in the music video that I'm working on right now because it's so awesome. People are throwing roses up at him, and it's so great.
Oh.
Yeah, this show is perfect for that. We got to do some process chat.
It is a show like, it's the thing you're selling to kids, right, is agency with all this stuff. It's like, I have the power. It's like, you too, child, could like break away from your parents in but a tiny way, and that you could bang two plastic figures together on your front lawn.
And I will.
On a Saturday afternoon, right? Like, that's what it's selling. So it's like, what's the basis of that? It's like any cartoon art. It's like all about the emotive energy and like the ebb and flow of it over the course of like X amount of time, right? And He-Man, all these characters are doing that. And I can give it a hard time for not being about like environmentalism or whatever, but the emotional stakes like are totally there pretty much at all times, even if their faces kind of don't always reflect it completely.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because every single time they're thrust into this situation that could potentially destroy the entire planet or universe or something. They're dealing with these really big forces. And, you kind of have to, I think the lesson they tried to put in there was like, well, you use your brain, use the strengths that you have. And even if it's not like literal strength, teamwork makes the dream work. What is that phrase?
I think you just made that up. That was a J. Allen Ridge.
Call my screen printer. I've got an idea. And I think that's why I think that's why it grabbed kids the way that it did, was like what you said, the agency part of it, because when you're that age, you have control over nothing. Your parent, like, even in the commercial, did you happen to watch any of the old Mattel commercials?
Yes, yeah. Where the dad is there the whole time, being super intrusive.
Like, playtime, Dad.
Then the kid also like pushes him out because he's like, take that, Skeletor, and the dad's playing Skeletor, and then he's like, ah, and he like falls back on the couch.
Right. He's like,
every kid wants to punch their
punch your
dad.
dad. It's like, I have the power. I'm the captain.
dad.
You know, the tech element with this stuff. I want to come back to that a little bit because, you know, it's just really interesting the way like technology plays a role in this show because even in the aesthetic of like the music, the synths of it all, and I think that's part of the reason this is still, it resonates because it's like a way to do stuff really cheap, like the synthesizers available at the time to do these soundtracks and all these sound effects. It's not like the old school Foley art that we're like used to in older cartoons. It's like a whole different realm. So like 80s tech, like the perception of technology in this era is really interesting because it's like every kid definitely wants a computer and cannot wait for the internet. They just don't know what it is yet. And the best they can do is get a plastic figure that's got like a monitor mounted on its chest or like a robot with a clear body. What's his name? Roboto? Who's the...
I think it is Roboto, right?
Robota or something. No, the He-Man guy that's got the clear chest and the little gears in it. Yeah.
Obviously.
It's just like the pursuit of AI and stuff. It's all like here, like kids, everybody wants it so bad, but we're not ready and we have no idea what's to come and how awful it's going to be.
This show has a very like liberating feeling to me where it was like, problems, never heard of it. I don't know. It does like brings me back to a time
by
like,
bedtime. It's all
kind of like it. This to me is like the epitome of like in your childhood, like you don't know about bad stuff yet, and the biggest problems are like beating the bad guy with your buds, kind of a deal. And there's something kind of nice about that. Like it's a double-edged sword because on the other hand, you can have like. I don't know enough about this show to like criticize it intensely, but obviously a lot of stuff from the 80s had like cultural insensitivity problems at best, or like whatever. There was probably, you could pin some sexism stuff on this, at least in the terms of the making of somewhere, whatever. So there is that as well. We knew less stuff back then, I think, generally, and could say less stuff, but there's just something about it where you're like, oh, I really wish that we could go back to this. I wish we could go back to this time where I want to live in a skull castle. Yeah. And have a big cat.
And the sorceress. I would like to wear a bird headdress.
She looks so cool.
Yeah,
can we tell? Her design is banging. And then she can turn into like a hog. Like, but with the same color.
Yeah, I love
really nice.
Like just the colors. Like I love the color theory that went into that character design is so cool. And the way that she looks as a bird and the way that she talks, like, she's just like cool as a cucumber all the time.
Yeah, she's legitimately badass.
And she knows everything.
Right. Yeah. She's been there. She's been through it.
Unassailable.
Right.
Can fly away, which is like very desirable, I think. You could just leave at any time. I could just go. So cool.
Yeah, the freedom to fly.
I wish I could do that.
And she's a character that like hints at a deeper story to this whole world in general, right? Like that's part of the magic of like, well, it's not like the show tells you everything. It's like you can go, when the show's over, you go play with your toys and you like extend the adventure. That's a very particular type of storytelling that's being done. Like you can't give it all away. And but if you just kind of put the characters in the right place, like the kids can kind of take it further.
Yeah, that's a really good point in how like characters like the sorceress pointed to an even larger universe than what the show existed in. They explored other dimensions, but they explored the, vastness of, multiple galaxies and all of that. There's a couple of episodes, there's this character Zodak that's like this very wise, he's a wise being. He's thousands of years old. And he'll show up on this magical flying throne every once in a while and hang out with the sorceress. And it's sort of like a meeting of the mind, sort of. It's like they're the only two that know the actual scope of the threat that they're facing. And just the fact that there's like, all right, there's this other plane somewhere within this story universe that we haven't even seen yet. And I mean, as a universe to kind of play in, I think that's always really fun when it's like, that it goes way deeper than what you're seeing.
Right. And they open it up a little bit when they introduce, so, first wave of He-Man, you got Skeletor, you got He-Man. And then we introduce Skeletor's mentor, I guess, Hordak, who's a little more, has like a different relationship with like tech and magic, whereas Skeletor feels like he's more magic based. Like Hordak has like a different relationship with like technology. And a lot of his clan and like groupies, cohorts, they have a slightly different feel. And I remember having an opinion about that. I didn't know why, but I was like, you can feel it sort of iterating away from that original source material. And it doesn't, this is only a couple years later. Like, of course, in the mind of a child, this is like He-Man spans centuries, but it's really only like a couple of years in the 80s.
Yeah.
I mean, it's syndicated, but there's only, how many episodes are there? Maybe like, is it under 200? There's
It's
like
130, I think, total.
What is it?
130, yeah.
Right. That's not like a whole lot of content.
It was just,
really,
it wasn't a whole lot of content, and it was ever present. Like you said, it was 5 days a week.
Right.
It was just always around, and the action figures were at Toys R Us on the end cap, right in your face all the time. And then the live action movie, and it was you couldn't avoid it, So, yeah.
Just don't be
exactly.
born yet.
You really cracked the code on that one.
And so I cry sometimes when I'm lying in bed just to get it all out what's in my head. And I feel a little peculiar. And so I wake in the morning and I step outside and I take a deep breath and get real high and I feel to the top of my lungs what's going on.
I like, with this sort of thing, I like to think about what they knew on the backside in the dark boardrooms of villainy, because this show, okay, think of a more modern cartoon, take like a fantasy show like Adventure Time again. That show iterates very far from what it started as, like most shows do. Instantly they jump away from what that first seed of an idea was, and they bring in new creative teams and it expands. He-Man doesn't do any of that. Is it because they didn't think people could handle it? Because even as soon as they bring in She-Ra, it starts to break down. Even though you could say this She-Ra show is as good, like the animation is even a little better, the characters are richer. But because you break the formula just a bit, it breaks the audience up just enough where it starts to collapse just a little. It's like, do they know not to mess with people, or were they they didn't know?
It's like, I don't know. When you think about, when you think about like how the show actually came together and the conditions under which it kind of formed, right? They already were on, in some way, we were talking about how much freedom they had, but also they were on pretty tight rails because they had these characters. Every single character and vehicle in the show, it's drawn exactly like the action figure or vehicle and all of that. And then you had like, the political climate at the time and parents groups and the Christian Evangelical South, which I have a book I'll share with you that my parents gave to me called Turmoil in the Toy Box, which is a very interesting read.
Wow, please.
So there's a link to that, and it's like the first link that I put in there. But I think I have to imagine, I don't know this, I have to think that they were a little afraid to mess with the formula at all. It's like, all right, well, we got something that's successful. We're like in bounds. We're able to do what we want. And, kids like it. We're selling a bunch of toys. If we try to change something, that could be disastrous, and it's like, I'm sure they were approached to do a Transformers crossover episode or something like that. Or, I mean, and they, like, most kids' toys at that time later had a dinosaur phase. Like, all right, everything has to have dinosaurs now.
I mean, I do find the image of them on dinosaurs very compelling. Just as somebody who wasn't, no bias from nostalgia.
Yeah.
I saw a picture of it in the documentary and I was like, yes. But I will say Battle Cat, I think, is my favorite character.
Which one?
Like,
Battle
Cringer, basically.
Yeah, the loyal.
He doesn't. I actually didn't really realize that he talks so much.
Yeah.
I don't. Like, I think I was aware that he talked, but he talks a lot. Like, more than I remember. I don't know.
He's got opinions.
But he's
Right.
a badass when he's like Battle Cat. So yeah, he was always
Right.
my fave.
And when he's
Yeah.
Cringer, he's like the dopey. It's like, oh god, he's like Goofy basically. It's like, I don't
Right.
know.
I actually love that. What another weird choice where he's like, I don't know about this,
I'm kinda
guys.
scared.
Yeah.
I don't want to go in there. Yeah.
I'm not sure.
And then he gets forced to be Battle
that's
Cat.
the other
and then
thing.
he's like,
Wouldn't
"Nah,"
you
like,
want to be
super
big and
badass.
powerful? He's scared of the lightning
He's
bolts, I
hesitant,
guess.
It's like, yeah, he doesn't want to do the work.
Yeah, well, my dog's afraid of lightning too, so
Yeah.
I guess you're never gonna beat that fear.
That's true.
Out of an animal.
Yeah, that's fair. If you're smart
It
enough.
would make more
you
sense if
know.
He-Man just had a big spray bottle. It's like, all right, get over here, Cringer.
We're doing it.
Sorry, this is the way that you have to transform. I didn't write the rules.
I do, based on what you were saying, and I don't know if you know the answer, I am very perplexed. I absorbed all of this historical information about the He-Man cartoon and the franchise as a whole, and I still cannot figure out why it failed. And it seemed to fail very spectacularly when it did. And so obviously it's not gone forever because here we are all talking about it and it's been rebooted a couple times and all of this stuff. But I just don't know. I recall that they mentioned a couple times that even though the show was very successful, they were just like, and we're done, and just didn't make any more, which just immediately strikes me as a very strange decision.
Yeah.
I don't quite understand how that lines up with She-Ra and like how that happened, and then there were some movies and stuff, but the one thing that I do recall specifically is a couple people blamed it on this overproduction of toys and just like creating all of this new stuff, and then the toys sat on the shelf and it devalued everything, and then it just bottomed out. But it was like a lot of bottoming out, like big failure. And I'm wondering, like, what was going on in the 80s that caused He-Man to just eat itself alive randomly?
I don't know the exact answer to that.
I think it's
mean,
Nintendo.
It was
It
Nintendo.
actually.
I mean,
Yeah,
seriously,
that makes
I mean,
sense.
that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
Because they tried, they had a couple of He-Man video games early on the Intellivision, and they had one on the Atari 2600. But franchises that are that sign the rights over to a video game on those consoles, like, you just really couldn't do that much. I mean, it's like, how many squares can you really work with?
Yeah.
I can't display all of these
Exactly.
pectorals.
It really
and such
loses the I
with
mean,
this
but
many
imagine
bits.
like He-Man being very, very popular around the time of like the Super NES. Like, that would have killed. Maybe that would have been pretty cool.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Right, like Altered
Yeah,
Beast
exactly.
era kind of
Exactly.
like gaming. Yeah.
So I think I don't know. Did you, in any of your research, Ira, did you come across anything like what was the nail in the coffin?
I feel like it really is just well, I heard somebody note that Nintendo first in the mind. I looked into that, and somebody was claiming that Nintendo even pulled the He-Man tagline, because the tagline of Nintendo is now you're playing with power. So they're still like capitalizing on like, you thought you had agency before with your stupid little plastic spring-loaded guys with no shirts on. What if you had a gun and you could shoot a duck on your TV?
Yes, hell yeah. I'm
What if you had a
compelled.
power glove? What if you had your own robot?
Yeah.
Where do I sign?
So I think it just sort of stole its thunder. Literally, there were thunderbolts and lightning.
Very,
it's-
very frightening.
It's kind of it's the same like marketing strategy, right? Like, but I think it's just the time was up. It was time for video games.
And the 80s were a very fickle time as well. There was just like the tastes were changing very, very rapidly. Maybe not as rapidly as now, but there was always something waiting in the wings to take anything's place. And we had short attention spans too. Like you said, I think He-Man was 2 or 3 years really, and then
Yeah, 1983 to 1985.
Right, and that poor
flash
team
in
of
the pan.
animators, really, they just kind of lost their jobs suddenly, because I bet they felt like they're like, we're gonna ride this to the grave. But like after 2 seasons, they're just like, no, syndication is where
They just didn't realize how quickly the grave would come.
they crashed right into it. But like it was pre-internet. It's hard to build your community. It's hard to sign a petition. It's hard to like get a Netflix series in this time. Like there was no
Almost
way to
impossible.
sustain. There was no way to sustain the fandom like there is now, right? Like you could you could spin this sort of thing off into a million types of things now, and
Well,
they
now
have,
they have.
right? It's like you know, He-Man is not as big as ever. Nothing will be as big as a thing like that in the 80s was, but there's shows that look good with like characters with way more like the same characters but done for a modern, more literate, like TV savvy audience who like doesn't need the toy. Like they want characters with story. Like the She-Ra cartoon was awesome.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but it has like a very dedicated fan
it's
base as
real
well. Like
cool.
it went over very well.
Yeah. And even the new He-Man, like at Masters of the Universe Revelations, I watched a couple of clips of it. It's really well done. The voice acting is amazing. Like they're taking it seriously, but they're also trying to take it back to that look of that original in a way that some of the other He-Man, like the She-Ra show, is kind of doing its own thing.
It's very cool. I mean, the thing that's pretty neat about the newer installments of Masters of the Universe is the creators behind it have real. I mean, I think it shares this with the original creators. They took the assignment very seriously, and it shows. Like there's a lot of love in the craft of She-Ra and in Revelation, and it's, I don't know, it's cool to see. It sort of justifies, like, for every fan of the show, that you kind of get drawn in by the universe, right? You kind of get like, I always knew that given the right budget and the right technology, this could be really great. Like you could tell a really cool story, and I feel like that's coming through in these newer He-Man series. It's very cool to see.
There's something about the like we talk a lot about how all these shows, even if they have like a creator's name on the front, it's all a collaboration between like a million different people, right? And this show is so much that, like, you can't really put, we could rattle off the name of the writers, we can talk about marketing people, we could talk about illustrators, packaging design, but there's no like one name that's the visionary. There's no George Lucas for this sort of thing. It really is about the people that loved it, the people that made it, and how that all kind of like continues to work together, right? Which is like a nice thing to think
I think
about.
it's like a creative dream in a way. Like you obviously want more money and like more runway and everything if I'm fantasizing about my perfect situation and there is no limit because it's in my fantasy. But yeah, like it's cool to just be like, me and my ragtag group of buds whipped this up out of literally nothing.
Yeah.
And then it became this like runaway success.
Well, and it's true. I don't think you can, really attribute it to any one person. It was definitely the whole team. I think the type of studio that Lou Scheimer ran had a lot to do, just with the dynamic and the way, like, from everything that I've read, just the type of person that he was, and how he kind of started with kindness, and he started with inclusiveness, and he started with, like, we're not going to do something that we don't believe in. This is a quick sidebar. I have not read this email for many, many years, but I found it as we've been talking, and this was crazy. Like, I did not see this coming. This was the
cut to commercial right now. Fade to black.
You won't believe what Jay says.
And we're
next. And we're back.
Yeah.
This was May 2nd, 2006. Subject: linked to Fabulous Secret Powers at SLACKCiRCUS from Amy Rosenberg to Adam at SLACKCiRCUS. So originally I had this email address, Adam, as in Prince Adam, and I had this online persona. Adam had a blog and all of this stuff. And so,
Holy shit, dude! I didn't know
hey
about
there,
that.
Adam. I'm writing to see if we can put a link to your terrific Fabulous Secret Powers He-Man parody video on Lou Scheimer's new website. The old site is still up now if you want to check us out. It's very modest. But in any case, we would love to be able to show it to the old He-Man gang via Lou's website.
Aww.
Here's the link I'm talking about, just in case this URL will change when your new SLACKCiRCUS site is up. Yeah.
Oh, that's really nice.
That is
what an
awesome,
email.
actually.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, who does that? My response was, hello. It's
No
like,
thanks.
It's like, show me the money, Lou.
Lose my email.
Yeah, I said, hello. It would be an honor to have a link from Lou's website. I guess technically he has more of a right to show Fabulous Secret Powers than we do. Anyway, we're big fans of the original series here at SLACKCiRCUS. Let me know once the new site is up. Would be glad to link over to it as well from Adam's blog. But I was thinking about this because of the kindness. You know, it was sort of like, hey, we think that this is really cool. You know, yeah, they got it.
Yeah.
And it's like, and like it made me feel good personally. Like they got that I wasn't making fun of their show, that I love their show. And they just saw it as hey, this is this cool thing on this new medium called the internet that the old He-Man gang will get a kick out of. I just love that.
That's really nice.
So
and I
cool.
feel like that's kind of the best case scenario of what everybody wants out of like any kind of social media platform, right? It's like bad shit can happen on those, but we all kind of want to like make something and be acknowledged and be like a part of like the community of the thing we love, right?
Dare
It's
I
like,
say,
you made
real
that 'cause you
human
love it.
connection.
Yeah.
Elusive to achieve it over the internet.
Yeah.
Truly.
And it was like easier
amazing
back then, I think, like in the early, I mean, because this was kind of pre-social media. And I don't know, it was like people were just emailing other people. They weren't just like leaving comments or something, but whatever.
Yeah, like that was going to get lost in my message requests on Twitter DMs or something, and I'll like see it 5 years later and be like, oh,
somebody composed that. So like, where do you think they found it?
So,
like, can you paint a picture of what? Because even for me, like 2005, it's pretty hazy. I'm not sure where I was on MySpace.
Yeah,
Ira wasn't even born
was,
yet.
Yeah, well, that's true.
So we posted it on the Something Awful forums back in the day. So it was on Something Awful, and I remember that it got pretty popular there. And a bunch of people would mirror, like you remember mirroring when people would like take your video and then they would put it up on different sites so you like it wouldn't kill your bandwidth. This 320 by 240 MOV was really gonna break the bank of my ISP, but
by the way, everything was in black and white back then.
Exactly.
For
No
listeners
color.
who were not born in the
No
80s
color.
like me. Yeah, there was no color until the 90s.
Then the file sizes got huge. But we posted it on forums, and then people, from what I remember, people shared it on LiveJournal, so it was real big in the LiveJournal community, and people just kind of shared it around. I don't know though how they found this blog, because the blog that I made was completely fake. Like I was completely doing a bit. I purposely made it look like 1998 Netscape website, right? And I don't have it anymore. I wish I had a screenshot of it, but it was like the whole thing was a joke, and it was like Prince Adam doing his like Doogie Howser style journal entries, like I had a really rough day, I got in a fight with Sorceress, and she just has all these like opinions about stuff, and so that's what she found. And it said I had like a little under construction sign, like with the animated, the little bulldozer. And it's just funny that Lou Scheimer's assistant was like, yeah, whenever you get your permanent site up, let me know. I'm like, oh no, like the under construction was a bit, like this ain't gonna change.
I was literally sitting here wondering, like, if he just emailed you out of the blue, like, how did he know you had a new site coming?
Right. I had a new site coming for about
the payoff of that was so good.
That's what we call a callback.
So, like, how did you, at the time, how did you know this video was sort of starting to, like, plant its feet in the, like, the internet community?
Yeah.
Like, how did you feel, other than that email?
Was it the millions
you're like,
of
oh,
views?
shit, something's
Well,
happening.
I mean,
like,
at this time, it was practically nothing, I mean, yeah.
Really?
No, this didn't really start doing anything until 2010. Yeah.
Okay, I was going to say.
It did practically nothing. I mean, so we had submitted it so we put it on YouTube in 2007, and we submitted it to a couple of film festivals as well. And so the first time that this played in public was at a film festival in Tulsa called Tulsa Overground. And it was kind of like one of those, what's the weird, the animation festival with the guy's name?
right.
I don't know. I feel like I should know
we all
this.
should know it, and we don't know it.
The
it's not Cannies
Film
Festival.
Festival.
Cannies?
Cannae.
Anyway, that it's like, isn't it like Mike and Ike's? Yeah,
Right, it's like two dudes,
Spike and Mike, thank you.
Mike's
Yeah.
animation.
So-
yeah.
I actually haven't heard of it. Anyway,
yeah,
go
so
on.
it was like a 90s thing or 70s. Yeah,
It's still around.
They do.
They still do it, I think. I think so.
So it played at this film festival, and it was the first time that we had ever seen it, like actually been able to see humans react to it, which really blew my mind. Because you don't really get that kind of feedback, and so we're in this theater and it's up on this big screen, and people are laughing at it. I was like, they're laughing at the right places. Like they think that this is as funny as I do. This is amazing. And, but other than that, like as far as virality of any sort, not at all until 2010. And then it started getting on the front page of Reddit every once in a while. And then friends would send me links and I would hear about it. And then it actually started doing something. And, the big story at that time was that it was a edited copy of our original one that went crazy viral. And turns out that like on the internet, people like short format and like to get right to the hook. So it was actually super smart. But it's something that it was so far off of our radar when we made it. It's like the slow roll intro. It's like, well, this is just the story. Like, this is how it is. It's not like, oh, we gotta capture that Gen Z. Like we can't exactly.
TikTok.
Exactly. So, but it was really interesting how that happened, and we barely promoted it. Like it just kind of sat there and took off.
Yeah. And you don't have to tell this story if you don't want to, but there's kind of the bummer side of this whole story, which is how, I don't remember the user's name, fuck them, but like the YouTube channel that basically like took your content, did not give you any credit, and then scooped up that early run of like first wave YouTube, scored however many millions of views.
Yeah, are you listening, you little punk?
Well,
get a
and
foothold in
here's
it.
the thing,
Like,
and so like this is one of the most popular comments on my website, especially or on my YouTube channel, especially now that it seems like there's this like word is kind of getting out for some reason. Well, I know the reason, but rewind to Proto of Snag'em, who uploaded the video. And the thing is, like, I think when people talk about this story, especially now, because like the internet loves an underdog. In case you didn't know, like it's like, all right, somebody's downtrodden. It's like, we're here,
Right.
And so, what was interesting about it though, is like, ultimately, I think people will characterize Proto Snag'em as like this, having this diabolical scheme. It's like, I'll show those guys at Slack Circus. They don't know anything. Like, I'm going to take Jay's 5-minute intro off of this so that it's more snappy. I think it was actually a smart thing. And, especially at that time with what people were doing on YouTube, it was just a way to share a thing that you like. So I think it was like, hey,
right.
I like this thing, and I'm going to cut it down to the kind of the viewing link. I want to get to the chorus because that's the way that I want to watch it. And that's apparently a lot of other people liked watching it that way too. And so it's like, it really gave it a voice that I was never going to give to it. And so it's like, in a way, it's kind of the opposite. Like, Proto Snag'em gave visibility to a video that I think, if I'm honest, probably never would have done what it did, because it was that I didn't create it that way.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah.
Are you listening, you little punk?
I was really
You got
curious
your ears
as to how
on.
you- I'm glad that's your kind of take on it, because again, like YouTube even takes that story and they do their own version, and they kind of like paint it as a picture of like, here's like worst case scenario of what YouTube can do to creative content and the people and how it affects the creators. And, you know, you can look at I can't remember. I did watch a video that kind of like told its
that was the Wavy
story.
Web Surf video. And that was like the tipping point. I mean, whenever Wavy Web Surf made that video, it was like, you look at my YouTube metrics and it's like, ching, it's like this huge spike. And
100%
I mean,
YouTube.
it was just like, and so all these people, and so now there's this new narrative out there that's like, and now people love to actually people about this video. It's become a thing. Like, it happened this week. Like, someone posted this thing about the He-Man video, and a bunch of people's like, well, did you know that actually SLACKCiRCUS made, and this is like this point of pride almost, right? And the way the network brain is very interesting in that way. And it's like, I'm kind of just like this hapless passenger in a rowboat around all this stuff, you know?
Right. Oh, it's way bigger than you at this point.
Oh, that's cool.
This is a question you probably can't answer, but because you're in a rowboat, haplessly. Do you think of any of this sort of like rebooting of this whole world of He-Man is, you know, tied to kind of like the evergreenness of that video?
Yeah.
Just to some degree?
It's a great, I mean, it's in the water supply for sure.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is it's like, because the internet is what it is, and it is such a big ocean, you anymore, good or bad, you can't really separate Masters of the Universe from this video anymore. And sorry about that, Lou Scheimer. But it's like,
You're welcome, Lou Scheimer.
Dear Jay, writing another email.
The same email thread.
bringing it back from 2006. I think that, okay, so I'll give you an example. When Netflix was working on the promotional efforts for He-Man Revelation, they reached out to me about licensing my song to use in some kind of promotion that they were going to do. And so they kind of told me the concept of it, and it's like, you know, this is the kids know this video, they don't know Masters of the Universe, so this is going to connect with the kids. I'm like, okay, like, that's great. I'm for that. And so, and it turned out that the real issue is that they didn't quite have the budget to license the song from Four Non Blondes, and so they ended up licensing the instrumental version of my track, and then they used it in they remixed some of the Revelation sequences and kind of made it look like Fabulous Secret Powers, where they did these other things. It was funny, actually. It was like a thing they did on Twitter. And then like one of the characters at the end, it's like, what? You were all thinking it. And I thought it was like pretty funny. But there was an episode in, so the first season of Revelation is two parts. So in the second half of season 1, there's an episode called Truth for a Destination. And so like they 100% used a lyric from the Four Non Blonde song and the, you know, Fabulous Secret Powers song as the name of one of the episodes. And so it's like, all right, so the writers of the show, Kevin Smith, whoever, like they, everyone know, it's like, it's not even an elephant in the room. It's just like, this is just how the internet works. Like you can't separate them.
Sucks that you're in that rowboat. You can't even enjoy
I
it.
very much enjoy it though. It's like, I love sailing. And so that's pretty cool. I mean, honestly though, it's just like, it's kind of fun to, you know, just see all these little things pop up and have a conversation about it, or just like really the most fun part is just connecting with a bunch of people at the same time, because like the humor and like the way that this whole thing is made, it's very specifically like, you know, we made this for like our 10 closest friends. It's like, it's very much like we made exactly the thing that we wanted to make. And so there's all these people that love it. I'm like, great, we could probably hang out and it would be like a fun time. And like, you don't really get that kind of connection many other ways. So I kind of like the rowboat, because sometimes people will like pull up beside me. And sometimes, like, they got jet skis and stuff. It's like, hey,
Throw a beer
exactly.
in there.
I mean, Wavy Webster, he basically pulled up in a speedboat. He's like, hey, dude, we're gonna like hit the cove.
Yeah, shooting t-shirt cannons at everybody along the way. Caitlin, do you have any favorite episodes in your
My He-Man
2-week digestive
journey.
process?
Actually, I'll be transparent, honest. And what I did was Google like iconic He-Man episodes because I wanted to get to the heart of the issue. And the first thing that comes up is like top 10 He-Man episodes, and I watched like random. The top 3 it turned out, but I just sort of like looked at it and was like, this sounds fun. And that's how I ended up watching the Battle Cat episode where he finds baby Battle Cat, because I was like, obviously I'm gonna watch that one. Like, he's just my favorite, so I'm gonna watch that. But one of those episodes ended up being like a very low stakes episode where He-Man and what is her name, Teela?
Yep.
They like I can't quite remember the inciting incident where they're like not hanging out, and then I also lose track of the secondary characters. I can't quite remember if it's like the King who I don't know the name of or whatever, or if it's Man at Arms. What's his
Randor.
Dang. All right.
His friends
why
call
not?
him Randy.
The King Randy is like, you guys need to like just hang out and chill.
Yeah.
Like, not everything has to be work.
Yeah.
So they go out and they play together, but then she ends up getting lost and like falls into the abyss that they just casually have nearby, I guess. Because it comes up more than one. This is not the only episode in which the abyss is a
no
problem.
guardrails. They're just like, what could have been done?
Yeah, she gets stuck way down there, and then they find her because her mom, the sorceress, like has a telepathic connection and like finds her out there. And that's like the whole episode is He-Man has to climb down there and get her. And the conclusion is basically just, it's just kind of a heartwarming family thing. Like, there's no, I don't even know if Skeletor shows up in that episode. I don't remember if he does or not. I mean, surely he has some kind of cameo appearance. I don't know.
It's more of a Lassie
that
episode or something.
Yeah, this is just like and then there's like this very cute, the way that it ends is Teela talking about like, just with her telepathic connection, I could just tell that my mom like wanted like me to be like safe with her, like together. And her mom was like, yeah, I do. But she's like far away. So her mom's just like saying this to herself. And I was like, oh, this is really cute. And like, not at all the kind of thing that I was expecting. Like, I was just a very random piece of episode content for, I was like, oh, they're going to like fight a dragon or, you know, punch Skeletor in the face or whatever. So I thought that was really nice. And that to me just showed like the breadth of what you could actually storytell about in this universe. Like, it doesn't have to be, you know, get the guns, like we're going to hunt the bad guys. It could be something like a little cuter.
Yeah, that was another, you know, the first couple of episodes when you're learning about Prince Adam and his powers and all of that stuff. The relationship that he has with his dad and actually his entire family is really interesting, you know, because he's sort of like portrayed as this weakling, you know, even though he's jacked and he looks exactly like He-Man. But he's sort of portrayed as you know, like a little bit effeminate and just like not very capable, and he kind of has to play this role, you know, because like it's a smokescreen, right? Like no one can find out his identity, so he just kind of has to play. He kind of has to play along. But
crazy how nobody
I
figures
know.
it out.
It's the
Exactly.
Superman thing again,
It's like
right? Like,
But like no face. Yeah, like what?
Right.
Okay.
look at your son. He's
Right.
there.
he's
Same
right
haircut.
there. And it's like, it's like, oh man, his dad's like, I sure wish He-Man was around right now. He could solve this. And Adam's like, I know, right? Yeah. That'd be...
Anyway, I'm going to go to the bathroom for 3 hours.
Why is there lightning coming out of the bathroom? You know, you were talking about the prevalence of rainbows and sparkles in the 80s at large, but also it's something that you you see a lot in this series. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about process stuff, but I wanted to talk about the the rainbow background that's behind He-Man. And like all of our like diving through VHS tapes and everything, they had this, I guess it was the publishing company. It's called Magic Window. And it's basically like, you know, what you would picture. It's like this kid that's running, and he runs through a book. And then after he runs through a book, this big rainbow like streams out of the book and like fills the whole screen, and there's sparkles, and he's sort of like, you know, surrounded by rainbow, and then, you know, Magic Window. And there's really no other way to get that energy than from like an 80s videotape publishing company's logo animation.
Things were better back
They
then.
They were.
I think.
There was
Based on this description alone.
I mean, they spent some time on it. So
Rainbows were the gateway to imagination, right? Like reading Rainbow.
Yes, reading Rainbow, immediate
Rainbow
association.
Bright, like the gateway between like our world and her world was like a rainbow thing. It's just
Care Bears.
Yep. Care Bear Stare.
They used to go on rainbows. Pretty good stuff.
In fact, it's surprising how, you know, the ebb and flow of like color, like especially like saturated and vibrant colors like that in like entertainment. Like I was watching a movie from 2011 the other night. Who cares what it was? But it was very gray and brown. And I'm like, wow, movies have been... No, even that's got a little more color. This was like the Fright Night remake with Colin Farrell.
Yeah. Boring.
It looks boring. It's like gray and browns. And like you think about the way like Marvel movies, it started out that way as well. And now they're sort of like, now they look like He-Man. Like Thor, the world of Thor is just He-Man. It's like 80s cartoon world. Like,
wow, is there only one type of like buff Viking-esque guy?
Yeah.
Like can he not come in other forms?
No.
I've never thought about
blonde.
this.
Yeah.
That's pretty much the way that you have to. That's the way you have to be. Yeah. If you're mythological, at least.
Sorry, Kaylin.
Oh.
It's how it is.
I'm tall enough to
vaguely
be She-Ra.
Scandinavian.
All right, Jay. So what are some of, you know, you kind of hinted at there's like a kind of some newer videos. You're kind of exploring He-Man's world further and bringing it into the modern times.
So I wrote a song more than a year ago called Brand New Face. And the song's been finished for a long time. In fact, I got so tired of like waiting to have a minute to actually do any animation on it. I just released the song. I put it up on Spotify. And so I released the track first and ahead of the video, which I've never done before. So we'll see how that goes. I think.
I'd like to note at this time that a lot of your creative process really mirrors the creative process of the makers of He-Man. Just backing into it. Just doing everything backwards.
Yeah, exactly. Justifying the whole thing. Exactly. But I mean, really, that honestly is whenever I do a song, that is kind of where I start. Like I start with the music. And there's kind of like a vague story in there maybe, but I'm 100% using the animation to justify whatever story comes out of it. And it's such a big palette. It's almost limitless. Like I've only used half of season 1. I haven't even used like the whole season yet. And I still feel like I've not even close to harvested everything that you could use in that old animation.
Yeah. Do you feel like you've got a different approach to it now that like you've seen the formula that works? You know, like how do you kind of like approach your process?
It's I'm better at it now. Because I've been doing my day job for like 15 years now, and so like I kind of know how animation happens, which helps a lot. You know, the first time around making Fabulous Secret Powers, just kind of fell into the process that seemed to make sense. We were just cutting up this animation in Final Cut Pro and doing freeze frames on the mouth shapes that we wanted, and then just kind of did it frame by frame. and not really knowing what was going to go where. Is sort of like taking it a step at a time. There was no storyboard. There was no like, rough cut where I did like, oh, I'm going to do a blocking pass and just kind of figure out, where everything goes. So like true story, like the chef sequence at the end, that was 100% a time filler. Cause like, all right, we don't have anything for this. I want to be done with this. How about we do a Monty Python reference? We'll just have like a random chef down in the dungeon,
Right.
like stirring a pot for no reason. And it took like 10 minutes and we were done. I'm like, all right, we just filled up, 7 seconds worth of time. But nowadays I do try to block out the sequence with a lot more foresight than that. So I'll look at the song and kind of figure out what the story beats are. And so like the previous music video that I did called Villainous Behaviors, when I did Villainous Behaviors, I kind of knew I knew who the main character was. I knew who the cast was going to be, sort of. But I just kind of went through and I captured screen grabs and blocked them in. Like, all right, so here's going to be a close up. There's going to have to be talking here. Here's going to be, an action sequence when he steals, he teleports the giant into a ship, and just kind of like, still framed it out and truly made an animatic out of it. And then I would go back in and then, kind of get into the keyframe phase, so to speak. So it was weird, kind of like, now that I know sort of how real animation works, the process is kind of the same. It's almost just like going backwards. Like they have finished animation, so I'm just taking it apart and freezing it at the right time, and then filling in the holes with stuff that matches the audio track.
Pretty interesting.
It's truly impressive.
I have like more technical.
Speaking as an animator.
Yeah, I was like, I have more technical questions, but I think like it's hard. I'm trying to think of like how people are listening to this. I'm like, without
I know
visuals,
it's really
like,
challenging.
Are you getting
Yeah.
it? But it's really interesting.
Imagine the keyframes. Well, go watch
Yeah.
the videos, but I'm like to
Oh,
ping
that's
off
true.
that a little bit.
Yeah.
Also, is just like I am curious, and you probably talked about this elsewhere, but I've never asked you somehow, which I find very strange. But like, where did the idea even come from? And like, why do you think it's persisted that you've done it so much? I don't know. Like, why not write a song and do a other animated thing?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Good-
I'm just curious. Yeah, like, what does it
Yeah,
mean to you, and like, how is it
thought of
born?
that. And like the idea originally was just it was like ripping off somebody else's work, as all great things begin. It was seeing like, all right, well, so Eric Fensler had this like really hilarious G.I. Joe thing, and so it was so inspiring. It was like, whatever this is, like, this is a medium that I know that I can play in, and this looks really fun. So He-Man, obvious choice. And so it's like, okay, so we're going to do like a remixed He-Man thing. Okay, awesome. Great. What is it? Like, what's the story? What are they doing? We're not going to do PSAs again. Are we going to write comedy? I mean, I don't know. And so I've been a musician all of my life, and have, played piano since I was little and all of this. And music is always kind of a starting point for me. And so it's like, if I can hear it, I can see it. And I was driving to work one day, and I was thinking about this Four Non Blonde song for some reason, like you do. If you
Probably heard it at the grocery store.
That's the
got
thing.
stuck
It's like,
in your
it's
head.
also like He-Man. That song was ever present for a certain number of years. And so I remember thinking, I should try singing that at a karaoke bar or something. Like, my friends at the time were into like doing karaoke. I was like, so that's going to be my song next time. And I'm going to sing the whole thing in falsetto, and it's going to be ridiculous. And I just thought that was a funny idea. It really was not any deeper than that. And so I went home and got to work making a track. It's like, all right, well, what would it sound like if I'm going to do a cover of this song? What is the song? And so then we started kind of looking at character stuff and looking at Prince Adam. And it was sort of like, all right, well, it seems like the animators were not trying to hide the fact that they're trying to make Prince Adam be kind of effeminate and sort of like a symbol for what I'm sure at the time a lot of people were thinking, like, you know what, I have a tough time, like if I'm gay, I'm having a hard time having that conversation with my parents. I want that represented somehow in this series or in the way that they drew him. I don't know, but it comes through in the show very clearly. And so I was like, all right, well, what if we just made the most fabulous dance track ever? And so that's what I did. And so then we just had this song and played, I played it for Ryan. We laughed a lot. And then it's like, all right, now all we have to do is make a music video to that. And that was pretty much it. It was like the assignment then was make a music video to this ridiculous bad techno song.
Yeah, I remember, seeing this back in the day and having, like, I thought the humor of it was that it's kind of a non sequitur. It's like, oh, imagine He-Man, but this. It's like, oh, that's very funny. But like hearing you talk about why you pursued the project to like completion and kind of that story element that you're trying to pull out of it, that's like, you're like, this is there, and we're going to show it to you like really blatantly. But it's also kind of subtle in a way because you're not like really saying that up front.
And it's like in the same way that, like what we were talking about with just cartoons at that time in general. I imagine it was it was a kind of a stifling culture at that time. It's like, well, you can't do this, and there's no violence. Like, if it's a kid's show, you couldn't do anything. And you go back and look, and it's kind of like, well, there is this layer to this that's very present, but they really couldn't talk about that. Like at that time, in the United States here, they really couldn't talk about it. And it was sort of like, all right, well, what if what if that's just elevated a little bit in a way that makes sense today, as a celebration, right? As a celebration of, everybody that's had, like every gay kid that's had that difficult conversation with their parents and that kind of thing. It's like, it feels in the same way that I've never even really put this together before, but in the same way that, in the show, it was like giving these kids agency, like, all right, I have the power to do this. It was sort of like in our story, it's Prince Adam is realizing for the first time, like, I can be who I want to be. And this is who I am. And I'm going to sing really loud, and I'm going to have rainbows and sparkles, and I'm going to wear pink and purple, and I'm going to do what I want to do. And I think, like that made, in what I hear is that really resonated with a lot of people early on LiveJournal and all of that. It was LGBTQ culture, like forwarding it around, like, hey, I love this. This is hilarious. Like, have you seen this? Right. And that's pretty cool.
Hell yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It really, I feel like it speaks to the direction animation was moving in, right? Like kind of shrinking down the story to be about like a character's journey to like identity is so much about what like kids storytelling is these days, right? And I mean, there's so much of it. Like I'm in the graphic novel world, like banned books, and like the banned books that are being banned are those stories, right? For people that didn't have their stories told. They're all like genderqueer stories that are being like trying to be eradicated, even though they're out there and they're selling great. So keep banning books, everybody, because it sells better if you ban it.
Yeah.
This is the most political I think we've ever gone.
Sure. Well, I feel like we're wrapping up the episode. We need like a morality.
You might even say
button.
Oh,
wait a
that's
minute.
it.
Are we having cartoon feelings right now? Is that what's happening?
Oh yeah. Somebody finally said it. Yeah, it's a successful episode when the cartoon feelings come out.
Yeah.
Because that's what it's all about, baby. It's about the feelings. What would the PSA be of this episode?
I don't know. Well, maybe Jay.
Oh my gosh.
What's your PSA for young creatives growing up today that are like, they're like, hey, I've seen that funny video. I never really thought about it that way. Maybe I want to make my own thing.
Yeah.
What do you say?
Go.
Yeah, go. Get out of here. You don't have what it takes.
Just have them. Awesome.
Crushing. Devastating. Cartoon feelings aren't always good.
No, I think that, and I say this I say this all the time, actually, in talks that I've given, but it is something I kind of live by, is that creating something good is always worth it. Like, I think there's so much value in doing the thing that you're kind of called to do, that you're gifted at, or like the thing that interests you, or whatever that thing is for you. I think it's worth it to chase that down, and don't let people say, you know what, like, that's not really worth it, or that maybe that's not a good idea, or tear it down before it even starts. You know, I'm a big fan of spending a ridiculous amount of time on something really silly, because it's worth it. You know, it's like when one of these sequences gets finished, right, and I see one of these characters express the dialogue in an even better way than I voiced it, and then I just start laughing hysterically, that's worth it, right? Like, that's worth it, because like, if I'm laughing like that, I know that other people are going to also, and it's like, it's almost a level of expression that I know it's kind of difficult to harness any other way. And so it's like, see where that experiment takes you, and like, try to follow it to its conclusion. Because like, you just, you know, like, and don't do it for this like targeted goal. Don't be Mattel. Don't say like,
don't be the Mattel.
All right, so we're gonna have like, this thing's gonna print money if we create these characters in exactly this way. But at the same time, though, I feel like everyone that worked on it made it into something bigger than they could have possibly imagined. And you know, the same is true of this, and just like this crazy like 15 plus years of this video just being out there and floating around the ocean of the internet always, in the rowboat. And it's like, it's pretty it's pretty cool. Like, you just don't know the ripple effects that something you do is gonna have. So like, pay attention and take it seriously.
And just have fun.
And take it seriously.
And more important, no. Maybe. 50-50, take it seriously, have fun.
Take your fun and have it seriously.
Take your fun and shove it.
I ain't working here no more.
Well, that's all for now. You can find out more about Jay Allen, aka Slack Circus, over on his YouTube channel at Slack Circus, and his Instagram also at Slack Circus, and his Twitter at Slack Circus. He was just really on the ball. He got all the names.
Yeah, look out. New social media platform. I am Slack Circus. Caitlin Cadieux.
And you can check out the Cartoon Feelings episode archive and other facts about Caitlin and I and the show at cartoonfeelings.com. You can tweet at us or join us on Instagram, and both of those are at Feeling Cartoons.
And if you're enjoying the podcast, we would be very grateful if you would consider taking the time to rate us on Apple Podcasts, even go so far as to leave a review. And if you're feeling bold, consider sharing us with your like-minded friends. If you leave a funny or cool review on Apple Podcasts, we might even deign to read it on the show. Who knows?
Yeah.
The choice is yours.
It's up to you now.
You have the power. Goodbye.